Ever wondered why the War of 1812 is sometimes called the Second War for Independence? You're about to find out. This conflict, which unfolded over the course of 3 years, was a defining moment in America's early history. It was a battle over sovereignty, a struggle for respect on the global stage. The young nation, barely 3 decades old, found itself at odds with the mighty Great Britain, its former colonial master. The issues at hand? Trade restrictions imposed by the British, the impressment of American sailors into the British Navy, and Britain's support for Native American tribes against American expansion. It was a war that would test the mettle of this fledgling nation, challenge its resolve, and ultimately shape its identity. It was a war that would see heroes rise, cities fall, and a new anthem born. So let's set sail on this journey through time. The war didn't start off too well for the Americans. In the summer of 1812, they had their sights set on Canada, but their invasions were anything but successful. Fort McHenry, followed by Detroit, fell into British hands without a fight. It was a series of disappointing setbacks, painting a grim picture of the war. Yet, not everything was lost. On the 19th of August, the sea bore witness to a different story. The USS Constitution, an American frigate, engaged in a fierce battle with the British HMS Guerriere. In a thrilling display of naval prowess, the USS Constitution emerged victorious, earning the nickname Old Ironsides as British cannonballs seemed to bounce off her sturdy hull. This victory served as a glimmer of hope amidst the early struggles, a sign that perhaps the tide could indeed be turned in America's favor. But the tide was about to turn. Now, the Americans started to gain some momentum. The year was 1813, and the tide of the War of 1812 started to turn. This was a pivotal year for the United States, a year of remarkable victories and strategic triumphs that would forever alter the course of the war. Firstly, let's talk about the Battle of Lake Erie. It was September 10th, and the United States was under the leadership of Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry. Perry, with his grit and determination, led his men into a decisive victory against the British naval forces. This remarkable triumph gave the United States control over Lake Erie, a significant strategic advantage. Fast forward to October of the same year. American forces, brimming with renewed confidence and determination, managed to capture Fort George in Canada. This victory served as a significant morale booster for the American troops. It was a clear message to the British: the Americans were not going down without a fight. Next, we must mention the Creek War. In March of 1814, this conflict flared up in the South. It was here that a certain Andrew Jackson, who would later become a U.S. president, led the American forces to a series of victories against the Creek Nation, allies of the British. However, the war was not without its dark moments. In September 1814, British forces launched an audacious attack on Washington, D.C., burning down both the White House and the Capitol building. It was a shocking blow to the American spirit, a grim reminder that the war was far from won. But the Americans were resilient. They were determined. They were ready to fight back, ready to defend their land, their freedom, their sovereignty. And so they regrouped, they strategized, they prepared for the battles that lay ahead. But the war was far from over. The year of 1814 was looming large on the horizon, and with it, the final push of the War of 1812. In the final stages of the war, the Americans showed their true grit. The defining moment came on the 13th of September, 1814, when the nation's resolve was put to the ultimate test. Under the command of Francis Scott Key, the American forces valiantly defended Fort McHenry against a relentless British bombardment. Their bravery was so inspiring that it moved Key to pen a poem that would later become the U.S. national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. The year continued to be eventful as December saw the bloody Battle of New Orleans. The 2-day conflict, spanning from the 14th to the 15th, ended with a resounding American victory. The irony, however, was that the war had already been decided across the ocean. Unbeknownst to the soldiers fighting on the front lines, peace negotiations were reaching a conclusion in Europe. And so, on the 18th of February, 1815, the Treaty of Ghent was signed, marking the official end of the War of 1812. The treaty restored relations between the US and Britain with no major territorial changes. After 2.5 years of intense conflict, it was as if the war had never happened, at least on the map. But the effects of the war were far from invisible. The American people emerged from the war with a newfound sense of national pride and identity. Their small, fledgling nation had stood up to a global superpower and lived to tell the tale. The war had tested the American spirit and found it to be unbreakable. So was this a second revolution? The War of 1812 might not have been a fight for independence, but it was unquestionably a fight for respect. And in that fight, America proved to the world that it was a force to be reckoned with. Well, it wasn't exactly a fight for independence, but it was a fight for respect. While the War of 1812 didn't mirror the Revolutionary War in its quest for liberation, it was a pivotal moment in American history that ignited a spark of national identity. This conflict, sometimes referred to as the Second War for Independence, was more about proving a point than gaining territory. The victories achieved during this war, particularly those in New Orleans and Baltimore, infused the American spirit with an invigorating sense of pride and unity. These triumphs demonstrated to the world that the United States was not a fledgling nation to be trifled with or underestimated. This war was their platform to showcase these qualities, and they did not disappoint. Another significant outcome of the war was the cessation of British interference. Prior to this, Britain had been a thorn in the side of the United States, providing support to Native American resistance in the Northwest Territory. The War of 1812 put an end to this meddling. It sent a clear message to Britain and other potential adversaries that the United States would not tolerate any infringement on its sovereignty. Finally, the War of 1812 solidified America's place on the world stage. By holding its own against a formidable adversary like Britain, the United States proved its mettle. It demonstrated that it was a force to be reckoned with, capable of defending its interests and asserting its authority. This recognition marked a turning point in America's global standing. So was the War of 1812 a second revolution? Not in the traditional sense, but it was a revolution of sorts. A revolution in the way the world perceived the United States and how Americans perceived themselves. The War of 1812 may not have redrawn borders, but it redefined America. The War of 1812 was a defining moment in American history. It was a time when the fledgling nation stood up to a global power, proving its mettle and carving out a place for itself on the world stage. Throughout this video, we've sailed through the timeline of this pivotal war, exploring the key events that shaped its course and outcome. We've seen the early struggles of the American forces, their failed invasions of Canada, and the bright spot of the USS Constitution's victory against the HMS Guerriere. We've witnessed the tide turn, with decisive victories at the Battle of Lake Erie and the capture of Fort George. We've experienced the fire and fury of the British attack on Washington, D.C., and the resolute defense of Fort McHenry that inspired our national anthem. We've delved into the aftermath of the war, examining its impact on the American national identity and its role in ending British interference. In the end, the War of 1812 may not have redrawn borders, but it undoubtedly redefined America's place in the world. It was a fight for sovereignty, a testament to the young nation's strength and independence. Now it's your turn to weigh in. Do you think the War of 1812 achieved its goals? How do you think it shaped America's future? Dive into the comments and share your thoughts. I'm eager to read your perspectives. If you've enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. There's plenty more where this came from, and I'd love to have you aboard as we navigate through more fascinating chapters of our shared past. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the War of 1812. Until next time.